Hey, Sens fans, welcome to Season 4, Episode 20 of the Senstennial podcast, a member of the Hockey Podcast Network. This week, we're taking a look at the four most recent games that the Ottawa Senators have played. We're going to look at the highs and lows of goaltending and a few other topics. So, we're going to kick things right off the top, talking about the recap of the games that the Sens have played recently, starting off with a very controversial one against the Colorado Avalanche, in which I'm sure we could talk for hours about that one call that resulted in the Avalanche going up 5-2 and Ottawa eventually coming back within one, but falling 5-4 against the Avs. They also played the Leafs, which they lost 5-4 after a 9-round shootout, and then back-to-back 2-1 games where they beat the Pittsburgh Penguins. And we'll talk about the effort of Dylan Ferguson in that one and a 2-1 loss to the Boston Bruins. I'll kick it off to other Matt first. And what were your thoughts on the last four games that the Sens have played?
Honestly, I've liked their game a lot better again in the last few games than beforehand. They actually showed some fight against Colorado, and probably one of the most Bush League calls I've ever seen. That ended up being the winning goal for Colorado. I'm sure it's been talked at nauseum about, but I've just never seen something like that, and it legitimately cost Ottawa the game. Then you go up against the Maple Leafs and you lose a very, very hard fought game that was one of the best games they played in recent memory. Dominating the Leafs, and I was so upset when they lost in the shootout, and it's unfortunate because Søgaard didn't really play well at all. But I wouldn't put the loss solely on him, obviously. Then we get a goalie win, which we haven't had in some time. Dylan Ferguson putting up one of the best performances by a rookie goaltender ever, and in their debut. And then we lose a heartbreaker to Boston, which I think we outplayed them for two periods, and then Bostoned us. They absolutely smothered us with a pillow in the third period, and then in the last 5 minutes, just that we couldn't do anything whatsoever. Overall, much better games than the ones previous, but it's tough losing this many games.
Yeah, no, for sure. And Bennett, how are you feeling after the last four? Because, there were definitely some good efforts in there, a couple of poor efforts. So where are you feeling or sitting after those few games?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with Matt. I mean, despite the fact that we're looking at three losses out of four, I feel slightly more positive this week because when we lost to, say, Toronto, Colorado, Boston, these are games that, I wouldn't necessarily expect the Sens to beat those teams. I know the Sens are capable of beating those teams, but, it's not, they're not, what you look at the calendar and you circle as, winnable game, right? I mean, those were those losses that we had to Vancouver and Chicago. Those were winnable games in which we ended up, completely falling flat on our faces. And that's why I think so many Sens fans were so annoyed and so dispirited after those losses. Whereas these games, I mean, I'll take a 5-4 shootout loss to Toronto. I'll take a close, tight 2-1 loss to the league leaders in Boston. I won't take a 5-4 bullshit loss to Colorado that was stolen from us by the bloody
Yeah.
Stripes.
Stop the steal.
Yeah, that was one of the craziest games I've been to in a while. And the atmosphere at the CTC was actually quite good. I mean, Sens fans ironically jeering every icing call that came after the fact. I mean, like, if you weren't able to catch the game, that we alluded to it before, that fifth goal for Colorado, I believe it was Lars Eller. I mean, the play looked dead. Everyone had stopped playing. Søgaard had covered the puck, and it was supposed to be an icing call because our player clearly got back there first, but the ref didn't blow it, and so play was like technically not blown dead. Lars Eller pushes Søgaard's pad into the net. They get the goal. It's reviewed. We lose the review, lose the challenge. It's so anyway. It was the whole thing. everyone around us was livid. I mean, there were, kid you not, there were moms exclaiming to their children, "No, honey, it's actually 4-4 at the end of the game," because that wasn't a real goal that they gave.
That's pretty funny. I do want to comment. I think,
yeah.
before you go on. So I think there were like 3 moments in time that you can be like, okay, that goal shouldn't have counted for this reason. The first one was, yes, the icing that wasn't called. The second one was the linesman who waved off the icing, apparently, as it got in the offense or the defensive zone for the Sens.
Yeah.
As soon as he waved it off, and then it bounced into Søgaard's pad and he kind of put his glove down. That should have been the second time the play was called in. The third time that you could count as the goal should not have counted was when Eller, like you said, took his stick and like pushed the puck and Søgaard's pad into the net. And I'm pretty sure DJ Smith did challenge for goaltender interference, and they ruled that it wasn't. And I was kind of surprised by that because I have seen that called goaltender interference multiple times this season alone.
Yeah.
So to me, Matt, are you suggesting that NHL officiating is stupid and inconsistent?
I may be making a hot take like that one on this podcast. Yes, indeed.
Crazy.
But yeah, anyway, I'll let you get back to the other games. But that just
okay, I'm not done with this game yet. Believe me.
okay.
That wasn't the only nonsense call that we had either. I mean, there was that one where Giroux got cross-checked and then he went back to get a stick and got cross-checked again.
Yeah.
And then they called him for embellishment because he fell over upon being cross-checked.
Yeah.
I mean, that one was, I was catatonic. Like that was like, when you see such an obvious penalty, it happens twice. Like he hits him once, knocks him over. Giroux goes back to get a stick, gets hit again, knocked over a second time. And so it's like, okay, easy. Like, 2 infractions, that's easily the penalty. And when he threw Giroux in the box too, like, oh my God, like the arena was just everyone. I've never heard the refs you suck chant so many times in a single game. It was insane.
But then Crosby'd all game against Pittsburgh.
Right.
Like, but you call Giroux, one of the most respected people in the league. You call Giroux for embellishment after he gets cross-checked onto the ice. And before that, Bennett, you're unlocking memories about this game. Earlier that game, Byram,
a much needed and much belated therapy session.
Byram went and boarded Giroux. There was no call from that. And I remember saying to my buddy, Giroux is going to get him back later. And sure enough, he did. But he gets called. But the rookie who can do no wrong, apparently, oh my God. Oh, what have you done, Bennett? You've unlocked this memory.
Yeah. Anyway, so the Colorado game was just an absolute nonsense loss, and it was very disappointing. But the rest of the games, the Sens played well in all of these games. Losing to Toronto in a shootout, taking them 9 rounds deep in the shootout. I mean, they have more shooters than we do, I would say, but, it didn't necessarily look like that. So, we took them to the brink, and that's cool. And that crazy win against Pittsburgh where, we had absolutely no business winning that, but Dylan Ferguson really dug it out for us, which is awesome to see a fun storyline like that. And then, a disappointing but respectable loss to Boston. I think that there's a lot of positives that can be taken from this week, even as, you look at it and we're teetering on the brink of elimination. I think that if it had been another week like the week before, where we're losing big games to teams in and around us in the standings, and we're not showing up, power play wasn't working, et cetera, then I think I'd be a lot madder than I am right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the week before, it seemed like Ottawa was dead in the water. There was absolutely no chemistry between anyone. Watching passing, I mean, you can still see it this week. The passing can sometimes be extremely sloppy, which really bothers me, but it was better this past week than the week before. The team seems to have more drive. Aside from that Pittsburgh game, the Pittsburgh game, they were awful. They had no business being in that game. The game against the Avalanche, they weren't great. They were rough, but they weren't consistently bad. There were some moments where they actually had good zone pressure against the Avalanche. But the games against Boston and Toronto, Ottawa actually was dominating, or at least the better team of the two in both those games. It wasn't until the third period against the Bruins that Ottawa started to regress and kind of go
Yeah.
back to their norm. And then Boston really started to turn it on and take that game back to being more of their game, we'll say. But ultimately, it was at least nice to see the Sens be able to play against two definite playoff teams in Boston and Toronto. And yeah, they're on the brink of being eliminated, if you want to call it or say that. But you know those games against the Florida Panthers, they're going to be, I think, some of the deciding factors on whether Ottawa sneaks in that 8th spot. And I mean, there's still a chance. It's very slim. I think
Yeah.
Money Puck has us at like what 1% or something, and I believe according to HockeyViz, the Sens are at like 3.4%. So very slim chances, but there's a chance. All right. Well, I guess if you guys don't have any comments on that, we can move along to the goaltending. And Matt Søgaard was given a pretty heavy workload over the last 2 weeks. And with Kevin Mandolise backing him up, it was like, okay, when is he going to get a game in here? And he's looked decent. And, I think he's only started a few games, but he's looked decent or really good at times. And Søgaard's had a heavy workload. So wondering when he would get a game in, but alas, he was sent down. Dylan Ferguson, who'd put up quite good numbers in the AHL with Belleville, he comes up and he gets his first NHL start and the first time in an NHL game since he was with Vegas back in like 2018. So it's been quite some time. But he gets in there, and from the start, he looked dialed in, ready to go. And he was making some saves that I was like, oh man. After the first period, I was like, I don't know. He is really locked in, but I try not to tweet about goaltenders during games. It's like the superstitious thing I have. I don't like tweeting about goalies. I wait till the end of the game. And I'm glad I waited because man, oh man, what an effort. And yeah, so let's talk about that. Other Matt, I know you're our resident goalie expert. So what did you think about Ferguson's battle against the Penguins?
I mean, it was awesome. Like, the goalie and the hockey fan and the Sens fan in me is like, wow, what a performance. Um, he is a clunky goalie. He reminds me, like, technique wise, he reminds me a lot of like Robin Lehner. He's not amazing technically, but he knows how to stop pucks. And there's a reason Lehner's in the league, and there's a reason that Ferguson got that start and got that win. He played exceptionally well and is now sitting third all time for rookie debuts, and then is second in like the modern era, eclipsing Kevin Mandolise. Crazy defense this Ottawa team has, but it's really awesome to see. He deserved that win. I wish the guys probably would have played a little harder, but I'm just going with the assumption that they were reserving their energy for the Boston Bruins. And we're like, this kid's got it for after the first period. So you hope that was the case, but good for him. What an awesome story. The ECHL to the NHL sort of reminds me of another goaltender that everybody seemingly keeps talking about this season in Andrew Hammond in the Hamburglar.
Indeed. And I think the other thing that's kind of been also talked about is, man, like Søgaard was put on a pedestal when he came up. And then, a week and a half of rough starts. And now everyone's like, oh, Søgaard needs to go to the AHL. He's not good enough. Goaltender of the future, my ass, blah, blah, blah. And then he bounces back after some people were like, oh, Dylan Ferguson should definitely start the back-to-back against, the Bruins. And I was like, I don't know, man. If I'm Dylan Ferguson, you just took like 48 shots at the NHL level. You'd be absolutely exhausted the next day and probably feeling a bit sore. And sure enough, I don't know what he had, but, had to sit out with illness. Mandolise gets emergency recalled and Søgaard starts and, he had a hell of a game. And it was nice to see him get that. I feel like that'll give some of his confidence back. And who knows whether he'll start Thursday against Tampa or whether that start will go to Ferguson. Remains to be seen. but it was nice to see him bounce back. And I wanted to bring that up with you guys because that's also been a topic of conversation. But Bennett, I'll let you get your 2 cents in on Ferguson, Søgaard, and what you thought about those two guys in the last couple weeks.
Yeah, I think Ferguson, it's a great story. There has been a little bit of polarization to come out of it, namely about is his moniker now the Hamburglar or is it Fergalicious? I think I'm on the side of Fergalicious. I think we want to bury, like let Andrew Hammond be the Hamburglar. We don't need to make that into a thing. And I don't think a run like that is going to be happening again. But yeah, I think it's great to see, it's always great to see new goalies or newish goalies come in and have success. I think that Søgaard has not been very impressive in his season so far with the Sens. His stats are pretty lackluster with a save percentage of 887 and a 3.38 goals against, and in a relatively large sample size of 13 games. It hasn't been ideal. I mean, I understand the situation. He's coming in. He was never supposed to be the guy this season, and he comes in at a critical point, and we've had a couple of tough losses, and that sucks. I do find it funny that Brady was talking him up in one of the post-game interviews or something. He's like, he's our goalie of the future. He's going to take us to a cup. I don't think anybody thinks that he is the goalie of our future. We have far better goalies in our system.
We need to have a conversation about this after.
Sure, we can. I mean, like Leevi Meriläinen is a much better goaltending prospect than Søgaard is. And I mean, Søgaard is just a guy. I mean, it's great. Like, it's good for him to be getting some games, but he's just a guy. And it had big energy of like when your grandma is like pinching your cheek and saying you're the most handsome boy in the town, and you're kind of just like, okay, grandma, I don't really believe you, but I appreciate you saying that, I guess.
This is a bit of a scorching take.
Yeah, this is out of left field. Holy
well, because
crap.
like Søgaard was drafted the highest. Like they went out of their way to get a 6'8" goalie, and
yeah, sure.
like he's, as you said, like he's been pedestaled.
Yeah.
Do I disagree with you about like I like Meriläinen's tools more? Yeah, I personally do, but damn, Bennett, this is out of like holy.
Yeah, I mean, like Meriläinen's playing in the Finnish league, right? So, which is a goalies league. He's played 42 games. He's got a goals against of a shade above 2 and a 918 save percentage. Like, that's far more impressive than anything that Søgaard has put together in the NHL. And again, different circumstances, but he's been in and around the team for a while, and he's been largely disappointing. And I mean that quite literally is extremely large, and he has also been disappointing. But it begs the question of where do the Sens go from here, right? Because Cam Talbot has been steady this season, but he's injured now and is unlikely to make much of an impact before the end of the season. Forsberg, he's been decent, but I think he's regressed a little bit since last year, and he's also now recovering from a quite major injury. And Søgaard has been okay, but not super impressive. So what are the Sens going to do for this coming season? I mean, you have to think Talbot might walk. He could re-sign, but I think if he was going to do that, he would have done it by now. We've got Forsberg onto contract for another year, I think.
2 years.
Another 2 years. I'm okay with that. He could be a good backup goaltender, or if push comes to shove, he could play, a bigger part of a tandem. But I think we're going to need someone else to fill that spot, and I don't think that guy is Søgaard. And my preference for some of our other goalies like Mandolisi or Meriläinen would be to let him cook. So I don't know what you guys think.
I mean, Matt, I don't know if you want to get an opinion in on the Søgaard thing. I feel like we've got to talk about that now, but to me, like, Søgaard is incredibly raw, and I think the problem is he's been put at the NHL level way too soon, too quickly, and given too much of a workload. And I also don't think it's entirely his fault. Like last night, when you watch Boston get that second goal where they basically just rushed, I can't remember, DeBrusk, when he rushed in, he just kind of went through everyone and then tucked a backhander and got it around Søgaard's pad. And sure, Søgaard's a big goalie. You want him to be able to stretch out, get that, but the defense hasn't been doing him any favors. And so for me, it's like, on one hand, I think if you have Cam Talbot or Anton Forsberg in it, you probably pick up at least 1 or 2 more wins over the last couple weeks. But man, I don't know. I'm not ready to call him like a guy. Like, to me, he has higher draft pedigree. He's taken second round, like Matt said. Sens moved up to traded up to get him. He's got a lot of athletic ability. He's not just a goalie who relies on his side. He can size. He can definitely move in the net. I think he's got to work on his rebound control, which has been quite evident. His glove is hit or miss. So that is something he'll need to work on too. But I mean, he's just a young goalie getting a lot of reps. And I think once you put him in the AHL and he gets more time, then that's good. But I think the only goaltender in the system that can compete with Søgaard right now, would be Meriläinen. But I don't know how close he is to being NHL ready. So that's my thought on that. And I mean, Matt, you're welcome to chime in before we move on, but that's where I stand on this. Hey, Sens fans, we know you're obviously a big fan of hockey, but are you also a big fan of basketball? Are you ready for the underdogs, the upsets, and the unbelievable action from DraftKings Sportsbook? The biggest tournament in college basketball is here, March Madness. Right now, new customers can just bet $5 on college hoops and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Plus, for a limited time, all customers can score a no-sweat bet during round 1 and 2 of the tournament. Go to the app, opt in, and place a no-sweat bet this weekend. If it doesn't hit, you'll get a bonus bet back up to $10. And we don't know if you're taking a 16th ranked team or if you're going for number 1, but you can get those bonus bets. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and sign up with code THPN. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Win or lose, only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code THPN. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See our show notes for details. Thank you, Sens Army, and go Sens go. Welcome back, everybody. And before the break, we were talking about goaltending, goaltenders of the future, and what Ottawa should do for next season. And if you're liking this episode so far, then please go and find us on our socials. We're on Twitter at Senstennial, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit at the Senstennial. And if you're watching this on YouTube, well, then thanks for watching so far, and please subscribe if you haven't already. And if you're listening to the audio format, then thank you, and please follow us on whichever audio format you use. And we're posting new episodes every week, and we have a few irons in the fire. So hopefully in the next few weeks, you'll see maybe a couple of guests coming on here, and we're looking forward to that. Anyway, back to the topic at hand, goaltending. Matt, I wanted you to get your 2 cents in on the topic we were discussing before the break.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously Bennett dropped a scorcher right before the ad break. And listen, I think when they drafted Søgaard, there were a lot of pluses to his game, but I think he had a bit of like the Sebastian Cossa effect before Cossa was a thing. When a goalie is 6'6" plus, scouts go, "Oh my goodness gracious, on high, this guy," and they sort of focus in on that. I think Søgaard, considering his size, moves extremely well, but technically speaking, he's not one of the most beautiful goaltenders. He's way less clunky than Dylan Ferguson is, and I think Søgaard is a better technical goaltender than than Ferguson is. But it's hard because I haven't seen as much development as I would have liked to with Mads Søgaard. Obviously, he's still, I believe, 21. Like, he's still a young goalie, and there's still time.
22, I believe.
Okay, so he's 22. There's still time. I mean, we had Gustafsson until he was 24. Same with Joey Decord. the thing with Søgaard is they have high hopes for him. They view him as the goalie of the future, but they also have this guy named Leevi Meriläinen in Finland, who will most likely be coming and playing out the rest of the season with Belleville. He's signed already. They just need to assign him. I believe he's injured. We haven't really heard if it's season ending or what. Listen, I haven't really been that impressed with Søgaard. Post that 4-1 stretch he put up. But he needs some veteran mentoring, and there isn't that right now because Talbot's gone, Forsberg's gone, and he's the guy in net. And that's a lot to thrust upon a guy who's still very raw, like Matt said. I don't know what Forsberg is going to look like next season with two knees that were just absolutely shattered, metaphorically speaking. And then Talbot, I would walk away from. He was too inconsistent this season. He doesn't deserve a contract from us, to be perfectly honest with you. I would probably be looking at a guy who is your guy for years to come. And in free agency, there really isn't that many options. Tristan Jarry is one of them, but you're going to have to throw a lot of money at him. Whereas there are trade options, especially Elliot Freeman dropped this nugget recently with Carter Hart possibly being available. And that's a guy I would probably look into depending on the price. Same with Thatcher Demko. I think his price is going to be quite high, but we've seen him be a good goalie for several years on a pretty mediocre Vancouver team. And a guy I really like that probably would cost less than both of those guys is Karel Vejmelka in Arizona. I think he's been very good for a very, very bad Arizona team. These are the options that I would sort of consider. But like the goaltending outlook is a bit bleak as it is right now. I do agree that I have Meriläinen ahead of Søgaard in the prospect ranking, especially after his season in Finland. He had 8 shutouts. Like he set the rookie record. But his time in Kingston was forgettable. So that set him back, but then his season in Finland propelled him ahead. Whereas I need to see more from Søgaard at the AHL level and professionally, because his time is dwindling down from being a top goaltending prospect to, a guy, as Bennett said.
Yeah. And it all makes you wish that we had just solved this question for good and taken Jesper Wallstedt a couple years ago in the draft, right? Like, we reached with a guy like Boucher, put a ton of unrealistic expectations on him by taking him nowhere near where he should have gone, when what we could have done is just solved the hardest question for every NHL team to solve, which is who is going to be our goalie of the future? Who's going to be the goalie that can backstop us to a cup? And there's just the move to not take Wallstedt when looking at our Sens system now. And it's like, we're sitting here having this conversation. Oh, who could it be? So-and-so, they've been up and down. No one has like really like decisively, taken it and said, I'm the guy. Like, if we had just taken Wallstedt, like, we're not having this conversation.
Yeah, not at all.
No, for sure. And I mean, all I was going to say is I still think that there's a lot of runway left for Søgaard. Yep. I know totally different positions, different players, different draft pedigree, but it's like Quinton Byfield. I see a lot of people that write him off. Comparing him to Tim Stützle, there's no doubt
unfair.
It's unfair, but there's no doubt that Ottawa got the better player. But the conversation before the draft was always that Tim Stützle and Alexis Lafreniere were more NHL ready. It was Quinton Byfield, who was the very raw, tall player. He had a lot of good tools, but he was going to take time to put it together and become an NHL player. And so to me, Søgaard is a similar situation. He's a guy who I think he's just really going to need to be someone that the Sens work with quite consistently if they want him to pan out, to be the guy who backstops them to a cup, like Brady Tkachuk said, which is high expectations, but damn, must feel good for Søgaard getting that boost of confidence from your captain saying something like that. The other name I wanted to point out, because I was going to say Carter Hart, Thatcher Demko, both great options. Vejmelka, another one. And there was one that I don't know how much I want to trust the rumor. It was said by a Buffalo podcaster who has a seemingly large following, but you never know with these kind of things. But he said that there might be some interest from Buffalo Sabres management to potentially part with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, which, aside from being one of the best names in the NHL, had one of the highest pedigrees for goaltending prospects in the league. Just I would say in the last couple of years, and probably still, I would say, has quite a high pedigree in terms of what he could project out as being. So the last time a goaltender trade happened between the Sens and Sabres, I think it worked out fairly well for the Sabres, even though they ended up trading Leonard elsewhere. But he was good for them in his time there. And who knows, maybe Buffalo's willing to return the favor, and the Sens could have a potential goaltender of the future there.
It's a nice thought, and I've always liked UPL for Buffalo, and I think they had a bit of a plethora of riches, but like they have a pretty decent defense core, and UPL's not having the best season. I'd rather go for a known commodity because next year we should make the playoffs. Like that's absolutely, we should be making the playoffs. And if we don't, it comes down most likely goaltending and coaching. And DJ Smith will not be here next year. You can put a goddamn stamp on that right now. He is gone. Our defensive strategy will be better. So we need a guy to make some solid saves at the right times. And, you know, we've hearkened for this. We just want a goalie who can have like a 9-10 save percentage. That's all we're asking for. And it's been so hard with injuries and terrible defense that like we still haven't found it yet.
Bring back Craig, Andy in free agency. What is he, like 42 now? Still going
he's
strong,
actually
baby.
having a good season in Buffalo too. So,
but his time with Ottawa was always like, oh, you knew he'd have one good season, and the next season would be a down year. So we don't want him next year. But if he's 44 and still playing, then we go after him.
Respect.
No, but that is a good point. Another goaltender who might potentially have some, I don't know. I was gonna say some tradability. I'm not really sure what Florida's doing, but you know, Spencer Knight, I know he is someone who's kind of been talked about as well as being a potential trade piece for the Panthers. Now, you know, he entered I believe the player assistance program. So don't know what the situation is there. And hopefully he gets the help he needs, but that's another guy who you never know, have a bounce back season. But I will concede the point that the Sens do need to bring in someone who has a track record of being good.
I will say though, I bet on Spencer Knight. Like if he's available, I bet on Spencer Knight because yeah, he's Spencer Knight.
Yeah, and you know, Nashville to me is also a wild card. If a guy, for whatever reason, if they decide to bring over Askarov or what have you, or want to rebuild and they make UC Saros available, that's another guy who I'm doing whatever I can to get that kind of guy on the roster for goaltending needs. So to me, there's some options out there. I don't know what Dorian will do, if he'll still be GM. I think he's earned himself a bit of leeway for the moves he's made, at least this year. But yeah, I think you guys, like, that's what needs to happen. We need an upgrade at goaltending, and we need, I think, an upgrade at coaching. So we'll see what happens, but that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, and one final point, which is just that you know, the Sens goaltending has been league average this year. The league average is relatively low this season. It's been a weird year for goalies. But yeah, I mean, you're not going to get anywhere near a cup without above average goaltending. You know, we a couple seasons ago, when we were in the throes of the tumultuous Matt Murray era here in Ottawa, we were crying out for league average goaltending.
Yeah.
But you're going to need something a cut above that to actually get anywhere in the playoffs. And right now, the Sens haven't had that. And yeah, I mean, I'm worried that, you know, let's say Søgaard, you know, his development turns around, he turns into a great goalie. Meriläinen, his development stays strong, he turns into a great goalie. Are they going to turn into a great goalie next year or the season after, when the Sens are going to have to start to go for it? I don't think those timelines are going to line up. And so I think that the answer is going to have to come from the trade market, but that is a very dicey proposition. Good goalies don't get traded. And I think that, I don't know, I think that this is a hole in the ship that could really sink us if and I think it could have already sunk us. And
Yeah.
you know, and we're staring at a window that might not ever open, you know, because of the failure to take a guy like Wallstedt, who even that might have been a little bit too late by the time that he arrives to be there when the Sens needed to be there. But I mean, this is a problem that we needed to solve 4 years ago, and that we haven't.
Let's just say Wallstedt's already knocking at the door at being in the NHL. And
yeah, and it's like
he's played 1 year of the AHL so far, and he's already dominating.
And you know, like rookie goaltenders, if they have pedigree and if they have a ceiling, they can take you to a cup. I mean,
100%.
Like Matt Murray was a rookie goalie, technically speaking, when he won both of those cups.
Cam Ward.
And it fell apart for him after that, but Pittsburgh doesn't care that it fell apart for him after that, because they have 2 more cups in their trophy cabinet,
in their ears. Those
all you need is a goalie to be good for 2 months. And you know, I don't even think we have a goalie that can do that right now. So the bar is slightly lower than you might think it is, but it's higher than what we have right now. And I think that's a very serious question mark.
And on that optimistic note from our very own Bennett, I think that that'll wrap up this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening or watching this week. Really appreciate it. Like I mentioned earlier, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all our social media accounts at Senstennial or The Senstennial. Again, also, like I said earlier, we've got some guests hopefully coming up in the near future. So stay tuned for that. Looking forward to dropping a few of those episodes. And thank you so much for watching the Senstennial. We'll catch you next time. Go Sens, go.
See ya.
Go Sens, go.